This month's episode is a former bonus episode I'm sharing to the main feed about our efforts to outsmart our resident foxes, most recently by putting our livestock guardian Rose to work guarding the chickens. I hope you enjoy it. Earlier this spring, we had been feeling optimistic because we had gone a long time without any indication of a fox attack. But over the past month or so, we have had multiple attempts on the chickens by what we think are a family of foxes. I work from home during the day and had started keeping the windows open to listen for chicken alarm calls to know when I should run out and scare off the fox. Even with constantly running outside every time I heard the slightest squawk, often because a chicken was surprised by laying an egg, I still was not able to fully protect them. We lost a couple of our favorite chickens and adolescent chicks, along with multiple ducks, and I was starting to get really frustrated trying to figure out what we needed to do to better protect things. Should we keep the chickens enclosed all the time while the foxes were raising babies and tending to see our chickens as an easy source of food? Should we give them a small chicken run with just a little bit of access to grass so that at least they'd have some outside time? Should we get geese, who are known for being very protective and driving off foxes? This one is still a possibility. We were in the middle of debating all of this when we got a text from our neighbor indicating that they had just seen a fox run by with a squawking chicken to take to their babies. Our neighbor told us that this year the fox had 4 cubs, and there was evidence of a mother and father with the babies, and all of them were living in a drainage pipe off of a nearby driveway. This information came along with a video of the fox babies playing around in the yard. Very cute. So my suspicions were confirmed that this was a mother fox coming around to both try and catch easy food for her babies and sometimes to bring a baby along to try to teach it how to hunt. I don't really blame the foxes. They're just doing what foxes do. And it's understandable that if you're trying to feed that many babies, you're going to go for the easiest source of food you can find. But that meant my job was to make the chickens a harder source of food for the fox so that the chickens stopped being worth her effort. I at least now knew where the fox was coming from, or in case there were many foxes, where the main fox appeared to be coming from. And this particular fox family lived down the hill from our big sheep pasture and our barn pasture. This meant that the fox could just trot up the hill, run through a fence, grab a chicken, and take it away again. The easiest solution that we could think of was to use Rose, our large white Great Pyrenees livestock guardian dog, who is also the mother of the puppies that we had a couple of years ago that you may have heard about in the disappearing puppies story. When we got Rose, she was about a year old and had been raised on a sheep farm about an hour away from us. So she was theoretically used to having guardian responsibilities. But when we tried to integrate her with our sheep and goats here, the sheep were absolutely terrified. I'm sure I've mentioned before, these sheep were not raised with livestock guardian dogs, so they see any dog as a threat, which is also understandable, but meant that as soon as we put Rose, who just wanted to come up and greet them in the pasture with them, they would bolt as fast as they could and would often run into fences or gates and, at minimum, damage the fences and gates. In fact, one of our big gates has a huge dent in it from one of the sheep running as fast as it could to get away from Rose, who was doing nothing but standing there, and the sheep got scared, and they all got scared, and it led to bad decision-making on the part of several of our sheep, including the gate crasher. However, that was many years ago, and it's been a while since we tried putting Rose in with the sheep and the goats. The sheep are older and calmer, and the goats are braver, and they're used to seeing and hearing Rose. She's been here for the past 5 years. Before we went to enormous efforts to keep the chickens in all the time or create a chicken run or introduce a new type of guardian animal that we'd never had before, we decided we would give Rose a chance to go to work again. If it didn't go well, there wasn't much lost. We would just take her right out of the pasture and go to one of our backup strategies. If it did work, this was the easiest solution by far. So Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago, I hooked Rose onto a leash and said, "Rose, it's time to go to work." Rose did not want to go to work. To be fair, she didn't understand what I meant because the last time I had taken her outside of her normal dog enclosure, I was taking her to multiple vet appointments because she got very sick after having the puppies and needed quite a bit of medical attention. So she associated going outside with being taken to the car and taken to the vet to be poked and prodded at when she was feeling really sick. Still, we made our way together, and she pulled me extremely hard and fast past the cars as if her life depended on it, which she probably felt like it did. She calmed down and began walking at a normal pace with her ears perked up in excitement once we got more towards the barn and away from the cars. When I opened the pasture gate and went in with her, the sheep and goats just stamped their feet and looked at her suspiciously. This time, they did not run. I walked her around to where I knew the fox had been because I had found some piles of feathers. And I showed her, and I said, "Rose, we got to keep this fox away from the chickens." I then walked along the fence line with her so she would know where it was coming in, at least to the best of my knowledge. And I unclipped her and let her do her own patrol. She took herself all the way around the fence line of the connected pastures with her tail wagging, sniffing excitedly, ears continually perked. A great white beast in a sea of waving green grass. She eventually settled down up against the fence in the barn pasture next to where the chickens like to scratch around in the barnyard. My guess is she figured out the fox would come all the way up through the barn pasture and go to the chickens via their favorite scratching area. Then it would grab one, run back through the pasture, and she figured she could intercept it while keeping an eye on the chickens. "Smart girl," I praised her. "Good job, Rose. Good girl. Keep that fox away." Rose grinned at me and thumped her tail, then turned her head back towards the neighbor's house to keep an eye out for the fox. I checked on her throughout the day, usually finding her flopped out in that same spot, taking a half nap and popping up immediately when I called on her to check in. She would do occasional patrols around the borders of the pasture, stop for a drink from the water trough, and head back to her spot. I saw neither head nor tail of that fox all day. The chickens were initially alarmed at Rose's new lookout spot, but soon adjusted, evidently realizing that she was placing herself between them and the danger lurking down the hill. The only downside, as far as I could tell, was that the chickens don't go to bed until the sun begins to set, which makes for a rather long day. Once we had finally herded the last of the chickens into the coop, I fetched Rose and brought her back inside, with her occasionally dragging me across the yard in her eagerness to avoid the cars. She still didn't trust me. We gave her treats and fed her dinner, all the while praising her to the skies for her outstanding work. The next morning, we followed the same routine, and the next, until we'd been at it for almost a week. No fox attacks, no sign of the fox, and Rose evidently now enjoying her morning jaunt to the pasture, taking her patrols, watching over her new flock for the day, and coming back in the evening to much praise and spoiling from her humans. As we rounded the bend into a full week of Rose at work, we did find our first hiccup. A thunderstorm rolled in late afternoon. Knowing Rose doesn't like storms, I went out and fetched her inside. I didn't trust her to find the barn stalls and stay in there during the storm on her own. Because the storm hit in the late afternoon, I figured there wasn't a huge rush to bring her back out. It would be time for the chickens to go to bed soon anyway. Unfortunately, I soon learned I was very wrong. I was working in the office when I heard a chorus of squawks coming from the yard. I dashed outside, and sure enough, there was the fox, chasing the chickens around as she tried to catch one for her family's dinner. "Fox!" I yelled, thundering towards her and waving my arms to look and sound as big and scary as possible. The fox took one look at me and zoomed off into the pasture and away, and I was left standing next to a pile of feathers from a chicken she must have already caught and taken away before I found her. Lesson learned. I had to teach Rose to use the barn during rainstorms. So I did, and we had another fairly uneventful week where I didn't see the fox. But I suspected it was only a matter of time. The chickens were harder to get to, but technically not impossible. The fox would have to walk almost a mile to get all the way around our pasture and up our driveway to avoid Rose's new guarding grounds, but it was possible. How appealing were our chickens when they were harder to get to, and spring was already providing an ample supply of rabbits and mice and voles and other little creatures that the fox really should be going after, in my opinion. Evidently, the answer was that our chickens were appealing enough she had to try again. I was just wrapping up a meeting at the end of last week when I heard the squawking ruckus begin. Rose was barking too, and pacing along the fence line, which seemed like an additional bad sign. I jogged around the yard hollering, "Fox!" and waving my arms as usual, but I didn't see anything. Rose, however, was still barking and staring at a big bush next to the driveway. My other dogs were clustered in the corner of their pasture, growling at that bush too. That's suspicious," I muttered and trotted that way for a closer look. As I drew near, the fox burst out from the other side, throwing an annoyed glance over her shoulder at me before running off down the driveway and into the woods. I tried to follow for a bit, and Rose paced me on the other side of the fence line, but in a burst of speed, foxes can run up to like 45 miles per hour. There was no way I was going to catch her. That last clash seems to have discouraged her from coming back, though. I'm now more on the lookout again, but we haven't lost any more chickens, and Rose continues to take her job very seriously. The challenge both Rose and I face is we are facing a highly intelligent, adaptable predator whose senses far exceed ours, mine especially. In addition to incredible speed, foxes boast the ability to leap as high as 6 feet in the air, can hear a mouse squeak from 100 feet away, and have a keen sense of smell that can detect even a whiff of prey or danger. I won't continue the laundry list of characteristics that make foxes incredible hunters, but suffice to say that the same skills that help them catch their prey also make it very difficult to keep them away when they're determined to use your chickens as their dinner. They are smart, they are perfectly capable of learning, and you are never going to catch them. This means that for Rose and me, our best strategy is to continue to make it not worth all the effort to come over here and try to get chickens. Rose guards our pasture and I guard our yard, and together we hope to deter the fox long enough that her babies are out of the den and she returns to more normal hunting hours for a fox, dawn and dusk, when the chickens are no longer outside and her natural prey is. I am thankful that Rose has been able to take up the mantle of protecting the flock after a long stint of not being able to work due to our rather unintelligent sheep, and I hope our summer is much less eventful on the predator front than our spring has been. Time will, as always, tell. That's it for this month. Thanks for listening, and I hope you're getting some nice weather where you are. Please consider leaving a rating and review of the podcast on the platform where you listen. It really helps. And if you want to keep up with the farm in between episodes, you can follow us at Foggy Oak Fairy Tales on Instagram or at Foggy Oak Farm on Facebook. See you soon. It's spring here on the farm, and for those of you who have been listening for a while, you know that in addition to the typical explosion of chicks at this time of year, it also means it is fox season.